The sky over Willow Ridge was an endless sheet of gray, thick with the weight of an impending storm. The air smelled of damp pavement, and a sharp wind howled through the empty streets, whipping Lena Foster's hair across her face as she trudged forward. She barely noticed. She barely noticed anything anymore. A year ago, these streets had been full of color, warm yellow lights spilling from cafe windows, laughter ringing from the bakery on Main Street, the comforting hum of life moving forward. Their life had been moving forward. She and Ryan had been making plans, dreaming of a future that now seemed so distant it could have belonged to someone else. But futures could shatter in an instant. The phone call had come late at night, piercing through the comforting silence of their home. A truck driver who had worked one too many shifts, a patch of black ice. A terrible mistake. Ryan was gone before Lena could even say goodbye. The love of her life, the man who made the world feel safe and steady, had vanished in an instant, leaving her with nothing but funeral arrangements, a mountain of unpaid hospital bills, and an empty bed that felt colder with every passing night. She had tried, at first, to hold herself together, to keep writing for the local newspaper, to answer the concerned phone calls, to pretend she was okay. But grief was a slow, cruel thief, draining her of energy, of purpose. One by one, people stopped checking in. Her friends, unsure of what to say, drifted away. Even Ryan's best friend, Jason, had faded into the background, his own guilt and sorrow building a wall between them. Now Lena moved through life like a ghost, her days a blur of empty routine. Grocery store. Home. Silence. Repeat. As she turned the corner onto Main Street, the biting wind tore a flyer from a telephone pole, sending it tumbling across the pavement like a lost leaf. It smacked against her boots, catching her eye. With a sigh, she bent down, fingers numb from the cold, and peeled it off the sidewalk. Volunteers needed. Willow Ridge Community Shelter. Help us bring hope. The words hit her harder than she expected. Hope. It was something she had lost, something she had stopped believing in. The very idea of it felt distant, almost cruel. And yet, her fingers tightened around the flyer as she read the details. She could ignore it, toss it in the next trash bin, and go back to her quiet, empty house. Or maybe, just maybe, she could try. For the first time in a long time, Lena hesitated at a crossroads. And for the first time in a long time, she took a step forward. The scent of warm soup and freshly baked bread filled the air as Lena Foster stepped hesitantly into the Willow Ridge Community Shelter. The space was bustling with movement. Volunteers hurried between tables carrying trays of food, while guests, bundled in mismatched layers of donated clothing, sat huddled together, their voices blending into a quiet murmur of conversation. Lena gripped the straps of her purse, her fingers trembling slightly. What am I doing here? She hadn't set foot in a place like this before. Charity had always been something distant, something she read about, donated to in passing, but never truly engaged with. Now, standing in the middle of it, she felt like an intruder, an outsider looking in on a world she didn't belong to.
First time.
Lena turned toward the voice. A woman, her face lined with wisdom and warmth, studied her with knowing eyes. She wore a deep green sweater with a name tag pinned to it. Margot, volunteer coordinator.
Yeah.
Lena stammered. Margot smiled, the kind of smile that had seen too much, but still found a way to be kind.
We can always use an extra pair of hands.
Before Lena could change her mind, Margot pressed a clipboard into her hands and led her toward the kitchen. The metallic clatter of pots and pans filled the space as steam billowed from massive soup vats. A young man ladled broth into bowls, his motions practiced and efficient. Others bustled around him, stacking trays, slicing bread, calling out requests.
Start simple,
Margot said, nudging a stack of plates toward Lena.
You pass these out while I show you the ropes.
Lena obeyed, her movements stiff, her heart hammering in her chest as she carried a plate to an elderly man sitting at the nearest table. His gray beard was unkempt, his hands weathered, his coat so thin that it barely seemed to provide any warmth at all. He looked up as she set the plate down, his dark eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and exhaustion.
Thank you, miss.
He said, his voice raspy but sincere. Lena nodded but said nothing. She wasn't sure what to say. As she moved through the room, she began to notice things she hadn't before. The way some people ate slowly, savoring every bite as if unsure when their next meal would come. The way others sat in silence, their gazes distant, lost in thoughts they'd never share. The weight of their unspoken stories pressed down on her, and for the first time, Lena saw them, truly saw them, not just as faces in passing, but as people who had once had lives, dreams, and families of their own. Later, as she returned to the kitchen, she noticed an elderly man sitting alone at a table near the back. His clothes were worn, his hands trembling slightly as he cupped them around his bowl of soup. Something about him reminded her of her father. The way he hunched forward, as if the weight of the world had become too much to bear. Margot followed her gaze.
That's Franklin,
she said softly.
He used to be a teacher. Lost his wife to cancer years ago, lost his home not long after. Comes here when he can.
Lena hesitated, then took a deep breath and approached.
Mind if I sit?
Franklin looked up, surprised, but gestured to the empty seat across from him.
I used to teach kids your age.
He said after a moment, his voice slow, measured.
English literature. Always loved the classics.
Lena offered a small smile.
I used to be a journalist.
Used to be.
She hesitated.
I stopped writing. A while ago.
Franklin nodded knowingly, stirring his soup.
Sometimes, life knocks the words right out of us.
Something in his voice struck her deep in her chest, a recognition of pain shared between two strangers. She looked around the shelter, at the people who had lost so much, yet still found their way here. Found a reason to keep going. For the first time in over a year, Lena wondered if she could find a reason to. The days blurred into weeks, and Lena Foster found herself returning to the Willow Ridge community shelter again and again. At first, she told herself it was just something to pass the time, a way to quiet the hollow ache in her chest. But slowly, without even realizing it, the shelter became more than just a distraction. It became a place where she belonged. For the first time since Ryan's death, she had a reason to get out of bed in the morning. She wasn't just surviving anymore.
She was doing something.
She folded blankets, sorted through donations, and served meals to people who had lost far more than she had. But more than that, she listened. She learned their names, their stories, their struggles. Franklin, the former English teacher, always had a quote from Shakespeare or Dickens ready, even when his hands trembled too much to hold his spoon steady. Maria, a single mother of two, had fled an abusive home and was trying to rebuild her life from nothing. Jamal, a soft-spoken teenager with bruised knuckles, never spoke about what had happened to him, but always thanked her for the extra bread rolls. Each person carried their own grief, their own battles. But somehow, within these shelter walls, they found warmth, dignity, and, against all odds, hope. One evening, as Lena packed away supplies, Margot approached with a mischievous smile.
You've been busy,
she said, holding up a printed flyer. Lena took it, her brows furrowing as she read the words, Willow Ridge Shelter Winter Fundraiser, written and organized by Lena Foster. She nearly dropped it.
Margot, I didn't think you'd actually print this.
Margot laughed.
Are you kidding? It's the best thing this shelter has had in years. We need donations. We need attention. And we need your words to get it.
Lena's throat tightened. When she first started volunteering, she hadn't touched a pen in over a year. Writing had been a part of her identity, but when Ryan died, the words had dried up. But the shelter had changed that. One night, after hearing Franklin recite lines from A Tale of Two Cities, she had gone home and, without thinking, opened her laptop. The words poured out of her like a dam breaking, a flood of emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Now, seeing them in print, it was real.
You really think people will come?
She asked hesitantly. Margot placed a hand on her shoulder.
I know they will.
Lena swallowed hard and nodded. Maybe she wasn't just helping the shelter. Maybe she was helping herself, too. That night, as she locked up and stepped outside, she barely noticed the cold. The wind carried the distant sound of traffic, the hum of life moving forward. She had spent so long believing she was stuck, trapped in grief, frozen in time. But maybe she wasn't. Maybe she could move forward, too. She turned the corner, only to freeze at the sight of a familiar figure leaning against a lamppost. A ghost from her past.
I never thought I'd see you here.
Jason said, his voice rough with hesitation. Lena's heart clenched. Jason had been Ryan's best friend. They had spent so many nights laughing over beers, making plans, dreaming of futures that would never come. But after the accident, he had disappeared, just like everyone else.
She didn't know what to say.
Jason shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck.
I should have checked on you.
He admitted.
I just didn't know how.
Lena studied his face. He looked older, more tired. Grief had stolen from him, too.
Neither did I.
She finally said, her voice softer than she expected. For a long moment, they stood there, the silence stretching between them like an unspoken apology. Jason cleared his throat.
I heard about the fundraiser. Thought I could help.
Lena blinked in surprise.
You want to help?
He nodded.
Ryan would have wanted me to.
Her chest tightened. It had been so long since she had heard his name spoken aloud. Slowly, she let out a breath and nodded.
Okay.
For the first time in a long time, she wasn't running from the past. She was facing it. And maybe, just maybe, she was finally ready to move toward the future. The Willow Ridge Community Shelter was alive with energy. The winter fundraiser had drawn more people than Lena had dared to hope. The dining hall, usually filled with quiet murmurs of people seeking warmth, was now buzzing with conversation and laughter. Tables were decorated with paper snowflakes made by the children, and the air smelled of cinnamon, fresh bread, and the slow-cooked stew the volunteers had prepared all day. Lena stood near the entrance, watching as guests and donors mingled, their voices blending into a hopeful hum. A few months ago, she never would have imagined herself here, coordinating an event, writing newsletters, rallying a community. Yet here she was,
Alive.
living. She clutched the speech she had written, her fingers curling around the paper. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had spent so long avoiding attention, avoiding feeling. But tonight wasn't about her. It was about them, the people who had lost so much yet still found the strength to keep going. Margot appeared at her side, her sharp eyes filled with warmth.
It's time,
She said, giving Lena's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. Lena swallowed the lump in her throat and stepped onto the small makeshift stage at the front of the room. The chatter quieted. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, volunteers, donors, shelter guests, even Jason, standing near the back with his arms crossed, giving her a small nod. She took a deep breath.
When I first walked through the doors of this shelter, I was lost.
She began, her voice steady but thick with emotion.
I had lost my husband. I had lost my purpose. I had lost myself.
A hush fell over the room.
I thought I had nothing left to give. But what I didn't realize was that even in the darkest moments, even when you feel like everything has been taken from you, there is always something left. A story to tell. A kindness to offer. A hand to hold.
She glanced at Franklin, who sat near the front, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Maria, with her two little girls, one sitting on her lap, the other nibbling on a cookie. Jamal, leaning against the far wall, nodding at her words.
This shelter didn't just help them.
Lena continued, her voice growing stronger.
It helped me. It reminded me that no matter how broken you feel, you are never beyond saving. That hope isn't something we find, It's something we create. And tonight, each of you is a part of that.
A ripple of quiet applause spread through the crowd, some people dabbing at their eyes, others nodding in agreement. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just speaking. She was believing the words. As the night went on, donations poured in. People signed up to volunteer. The shelter had secured enough funds to keep its doors open through the harsh winter. At one point, Lena felt a familiar presence beside her. Jason.
You did good, Lena.
He said quietly. She looked at him, really looked at him, the grief still lingering in his eyes, the weight of all the things left unsaid between them. Maybe they would never be the same as they once were. Maybe they were meant to be. But they were here, standing in the same place, moving forward in their own way.
Thanks.
She murmured. He hesitated before reaching into his coat pocket, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper.
Ryan wrote this a few weeks before the accident.
He admitted.
I found it while cleaning out some of his stuff. I didn't know if I should give it to you, but I think you should have it.
Lena's breath caught as she took the paper from his hands. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it, her eyes scanning Ryan's familiar handwriting.
Lena, if you're reading this, it probably means I never got the chance to say it in person. But I need you to know something. You are the strongest person I know. And whatever happens, I want you to promise me one thing. Don't stop living. Don't let the world make you small. You have so much light in you, and people are going to need it. The world is going to need it. Don't be afraid to keep going. I love you. Always. Ryan.
Lena pressed a hand to her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. For so long, she had felt like she was failing Ryan by moving on. But maybe she had it all wrong. Maybe living wasn't leaving him behind. It was honoring him. A shaky breath left her lips. She folded the letter carefully and placed it over her heart. For the first time in a long time, the grief didn't feel like a chain pulling her under. It felt like something lighter. Something she could carry without being swallowed by it. She turned back toward the fundraiser, toward the shelter, toward the people who had unknowingly saved her. She had found her purpose again. She had found hope. And this time, she wasn't letting go.